Hello and welcome back to the Gaming News Canada show presented by GBG Plc. I'm your host, Steve McAllister. 1 week from today will mark the 4th anniversary of our coverage of the sports betting and gaming industry in Canada and beyond. Since launching the first Parlay newsletter way back on February 18th, 2021, we've done our best to get a grasp on the many tentacles of the industry, regulation, compliance, innovation, to name a few. And of course, this industry also relies on learned people who understand the law. Two such people are Don Bourgeois, who's been exposed to gambling law since the late 1980s, and Harley Redlick, who has worn industry hats as a consultant, a legal expert, an overall gambling industry expert, and a bettor. In early April, Bourgeois and Redlick are bringing back the Gambling Law Certificate program at Osgoode Hall Law School in Toronto. So to understand more about the program and also pick their brains on some other related topics, we welcome to the podcast the principal of Gaming and Regulation Group, Inc., and counsel to the Gambling Law Practice Group at Fogler Rubinoff LLP, Don Bourgeois, and the man behind the Sharp Edge Picks handle and principal of H. Redlick Consulting, Inc., Harley Redlick. Hey, Don, so great to have you on the podcast for the first time.
Yeah, I'm really pleased. I was wondering what I had to do to get on the podcast, so that this works out very well.
Well, we just need a Harley. Just need a Harley to strong arm me, Don.
Yeah.
Hey, Harley, I want to start with you because you've been you were a regular when we started the Parlay way back in 2021 and those early days where we did the Clubhouse audio shows on Thursday afternoons, Harley. But wanted to get you on and talk about the Super Bowl right away, and I think a bit of a surprise result on Sunday night with the not just Eagles beating the Chiefs, but really kind of doing a number on the defending two-time Super Bowl champions. I'm assuming that it ended up being a pretty good night for the sports books.
It was an awesome night for the sports books. I mean, the truth is, when you get to charge vig and you have same game parlays and make extra money, most nights are good for the sports books. Last night was amazing. BetMGM has already admitted it was the best night in their history. Saquon Barkley never scored a touchdown. A lot of people still back the Chiefs and Mahomes. Nobody thought they'd get blown out like this. So a lot of teasers with the Chiefs plus 7.5. Nobody could fathom that they could lose and get blown out. Everything kind of worked. Kelsey was a no-show, as evident by the fact that Taylor Swift, I think, only made it on once. The over-under of her cameos was 5.5. So, I mean, Mahomes wasn't good. Kelsey was almost non-existent. The Chiefs got blown out. And Barkley didn't do much. So, I mean, yes, the books couldn't have scripted it much better.
Hey, Harley, I mean, people were talking about last week how this was going to be, this is obviously the biggest sporting event of the year. I think the American Gaming Association put out a press release last week. I think an unprecedented, $139 billion would be spent on legal sports books. We have covered on this podcast and in the newsletter the last few weeks about as operators have put out their financial results that the sports books took a bit of pounding during the NFL regular season. Is a night like Sunday night, is that enough to kind of, balance the scales?
More than make up for it. I mean, listen, don't cry for the sports books, although from about mid-November till, this week, it's been almost nothing but favorites with the exception of the Lions getting upset at home to the Commanders a couple weeks back. So when the favorites are winning and there's no upsets, the players tend to hold their own, but it doesn't take much. It takes one upset by Washington to Detroit to nullify a lot in a Super Bowl result like yesterday's. And Las Vegas always publishes their results. They'll have them out within a day or two, and you'll see the margins, and I expect you to see some record numbers.
Hey, Don, your journey in gambling industry, it's quite varied. You've been around the block, as they say, for quite a while now. It includes almost a decade as the general counsel for the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario. You spent time with the Ontario Racing Commission. I think you also dabbled a little bit on the gaming side during your time with the Attorney General of Ontario. I just love, I know Harley's story quite well about his strategy. I'd love you just take a couple of minutes about how you kind of got your wet in this industry, and what's happened since then?
The initial start was when I was at Ministry of Consumer Commercial Relations, which at that time was sort of from birth to death and everything in between as a regulator. And that ministry was responsible for the issuance of lottery licenses to charities. And during that time period, charities, in fact, were a very large factor in the gaming industry, the gaming sector in Ontario and other parts of Canada. At one time, break open tickets alone in Ontario were $1 billion a year. So the other big project, or the big area, was horse racing. And then, of course, in the 1980s, 1990s, the evolution of land-based casinos and slot facilities at racetracks, etc., started to alter the type of gaming that was occurring. And the charities were sort of left behind because they didn't have, for legal reasons, the ability to use electronic games. That was one of the very large changes. And with governments then trying to decide, how do we keep charities in the game? Interesting enough, the initial thought for the regulation of operators was in order to put the charities back in the driver's seat in bingo halls and various other locations in order to ensure that the monies that were raised were being used for charitable purposes. And so the Gaming Services Act was the initial statute. Then the Gaming Control Act really was as a result of the decision to open up Windsor Casino. So before the Gaming Services Act was actually proclaimed in force, it was amended to become the Gaming Control Act to have a much broader sweep, including the casinos, land-based casinos. And then the other aspect of OLG's product at the time, the lottery tickets, arose as a result of an ombudsman's report back in the early 2000s, which altered and I think really focused attention on. There's always an important aspect of looking at the integrity of gaming and the products, etc. But the ombudsman's report refocused that attention. And as a regulator, we were now tasked with regulating a product that was lottery tickets that had not been regulated. That doesn't mean it was not a good product, but there was no independent regulation of it. And that was brought forward in the early 2000s. And then, of course, the OLG procurement process in Ontario to have private sector operators operate most of the land-based gaming and some of the other aspects. So there's been a very strong shift. And that shift has been also focused, I think, on ensuring that the Ontarians get gaming products in a fashion that they want them. And high quality gaming products and products that have integrity provided by people with integrity and that produced entertainment in a responsible fashion. And then, of course, iGaming started both at OLG, but also back in the mid 2010s, 2018, that time period, a focus on what's the next phase of gaming in Ontario and in reality across Canada with respect to a competitive regulated market. The OLG did a good job, but it was never capturing more than 15%, 16, 17% of the overall market. And again, the focus was on ensuring that there was high quality product that had integrity, offered by people with integrity, and capturing what people wanted in a fashion that they wanted to enjoy this form of entertainment. So it's been an interesting evolution, starting with break open tickets and 50-50 raffles and various other things. That was a very large business. It starts to morph into more the OLG type of activity. And then it becomes a much more sophisticated business. So the other big change has obviously been electronics. And tied with that, personal information and the protection of personal information, cybersecurity, and related very, very technically advanced types of things, in which we were able to draw on European experiences. And I think we see, especially in the iGaming market, a very strong European presence based upon GDPR experience that they had, the integrity systems that were in place. So I think today we have a very strong gaming market, not only in Ontario, but across Canada, that is something that is delivering to people the type of gaming activities that they want to do, where and when they want to do it, but doing it in a responsible manner with all of the built-in responsible gambling activities.
Hey, Don, that's a great segue to my next question. And Harley, maybe we'll start with you. And I believe that this certificate program at Osgoode Hall, and you two, I believe, are both graduates of the law program at Osgoode Hall. But this program launched in 2017. Harley, is that right?
Yeah.
And what was and do you remember, was there a conversation? Did you and Don bump into each other at a conference, or what was the conversation that sparked the creation of this program 7 years ago?
Okay, so 7 years ago, the landscape was different. I came up kind of with an idea around this, more focused on the sports betting, because I knew sports betting was going to legalize. I knew things were going to change. I was even contemplating doing a PhD in sports betting and integrity or match fixing. And one of the associate deans at Osgoode that I knew personally in my day there said, great idea, but there's absolutely nobody at Osgoode that's even close to as qualified as you are. So you can't do a PhD because there's nobody to overlook you. And she put me in touch with Osgoode Professional Development and Stefan McRoberts. And obviously I knew Paul Burns from the commercial side. And they wanted more lawyers and regulators involved. And not surprisingly, every time a lawyer/regulator's name came up, it was Don's name. And Don joined us, and Don was super into it. And Stefan thought Don should co-lead it with me. And I thought that was a great idea because I came from the practical aspect, but besides having a law degree, never really practiced in the area. And combined, we formed this, and 7 years ago it was interesting, but I mean, there was no iGaming, there was no FanDuel, you couldn't even bet sports at the casino except for like out of a Proline kiosk in the hallway. So, I mean, the resemblance of what that program looked like 7 years ago to what the program looks like today is very indicative of kind of the evolution of the industry.
Yeah, I want to get into that a bit, Don, because looking at the agenda or the curriculum for this program that's going to start in early April, and I think it ends the first week of May, there's 5 modules for the program, and there's regulation of gaming and legal framework. There's a public policy session. There's a session on compliance and risk mitigation. And then there are separate modules on operational and business issues. To Harley's point, how has that program evolved, and why the focus on the topics that you and Harley have identified for this version?
I think largely because the industry has grown, not only in Ontario, but across Canada. And this is a Canadian-wide program. There are people signed up from across Canada, and it can be done online as well as in person. But a major change has been the growing sophistication of the private sector, the growing importance of the private sector in the day-to-day operations of the gaming, and business decisions start to be made, and how to implement the regulatory structure and the evolving regulatory structure in an efficient way. So the first iteration, the 2017 version of this, was more teacher at the front saying, these are the rules, memorize this rule, et cetera. This version is a lot more focused on how do businesses achieve compliance, dealing with the risk, mitigating the risk, but at the same time ensuring they're doing it in a fashion that is successful from a business perspective. Another aspect of it, one of the topics, Harley has talked about sports wagering. One of the topics is, what does that contractual relationship look like between the sports entities and the gaming entities? Another aspect is around the financing of the industry, which is not something we touched on in the previous version because it was more compliance oriented. Compliance is still a critical element of this, but it's a broader business focus to these 5 modules in comparison to the 2017 version of the program.
Harley, to that end, then, what are the kinds of people that you and Don would recommend would really benefit from signing up for this program and participating in it?
Great question. I mean, obviously, lawyers, especially junior lawyers that are operating in this space, are, I mean, ideal candidates. I think if you're a young lawyer or even an older lawyer who likes this space, or maybe you've fluked into it a little bit. So, for example, we've had in the past somebody who maybe is a commercial contracts type lawyer, but one of their clients did catering and then they had to do it for a casino. And once you're involved or your clients are involved in the casino business, there's a lot more rules and regulations, even for the catering staff or supplying alcohol or any aspect of it. Obviously, if you're doing anything remotely related to employment, product and supplies and the chips and all that stuff. So, I mean, lawyers in that space or who want to get into that space, this would be beneficial both from a knowledge and a networking perspective. And we're the only course that Osgoode's ever had that actually has non-lawyers in it. So accountants and compliance people. And I mean, if I was a banker in a former life, if I was a banker at a Schedule A bank right now and I was not happy with my job, I would probably take this course because AML is a big aspect of both our course. And obviously, I mean, TD and the banks are having those problems. And maybe it's enough to give you an edge even in something like that. So it's more kind of wide in scope than most of these courses.
It's funny, Don. It's the one thing we really hammered away at in here over 4 years, not only in the newsletter, but on these weekly audio shows and now podcasts, is that the opportunities to work in this industry. And Harley mentioned banking. That's something we've talked about. We've had Dr. Michael Narain from Brock University Sports Management Program on, talk to him about, it makes a lot of sense to have some kind of introduction to this industry as part of your curriculum if you want to graduate from a sports management program and look to work in an industry and get your start in a sports career, that there's opportunities here. But as Harley says, I would think that between the curriculum and the networking, that there are opportunities here to get exposed to the industry and see that there are some incredibly viable jobs.
I agree entirely. And you go a little bit further, then you start to go down the path of the marketers and the digital marketing around these, the social media aspect of it, understanding. I think it's always useful to understand the background of an industry that you're working in. And as a result, if you're doing, it's not just understanding what the rules are, the registrar's standard and requirements related to the use of social influencers and athletes on iGaming and sports wagering, etc. It's also, I think, useful to understand more broadly the responsible gambling aspects of this, what is expected. There's also a high focus on KYC, knowing your customers in this iteration of the program and trying to understand those individuals, what is driving them from a good thing to look to this as a form of entertainment, and how, but what are some of the other aspects of it? Then you get into the technology side of these things. So the hardcore technology aspect of it, and what you need to understand in order to ensure that the products that you or your startup company are coming forth and want to do some gaming issues, whether land-based or iGaming, what do you need to have? What do you need to consider? Who do you need to talk to and understand? What is the testing laboratory around this? So GLI is going to be doing a presentation around what they do as well and how it integrates to the overall. So you have a very broad spectrum of people who could have a good, solid opportunity to get into this industry, and understanding the regulatory side of it, what the business dynamics are, all of these things, I think, is a good introduction for people to understand.
Hey, gaming news guys. Are you ready to win a bigger share of Canada's rapidly expanding gaming market? Then GBG are ready to help. As the global leaders in identity verification, GBG partner with over 60% of iGaming Ontario brands to help them onboard more players, maximize match rates, and deliver FinTrack compliance. Visit gbgplc.com today and talk to the trust experts. Hey Harley, before we hit the record button, Don mentioned that the idea of this program got resurrected at a Canadian Gaming Association event just before Christmas back in 2023. Maybe you can just tell the audience a little bit about that.
So again, I mean, people who remember taking the course looked at us and said, wow, the landscape's changed dramatically in the last few years. Are you guys planning to launch it again? Because it's a good brush up for the people who maybe took it in the past, and a phenomenal opportunity in a completely different environment and a lot more complicated players and actions and activities than it was the first time around. And I mean, I think Don and I were both kind of contemplating it or aware of the fact that the landscape was obviously very different, and kind of it was the nudge that kind of made it happen.
By the way, for the people listening to this podcast, if you want to register for the program, the website is www.osgoode, and that's with an E on the end, pd.ca, Osgoode PD, PD professional development.ca, and you can find the program there. We'll also include the link to the actual registration page and the Substack post that goes with this podcast. Don, you mentioned earlier too. I mean, that's the one thing that the people that register for this course is they're going to be exposed and have a chance to meet a lot of people that work in the industry or who are going to attend these sessions as presenters. Correct?
That's right. That's right. Now, the program is being done in person at the Osgoode Professional Development offices at Yonge and Dundas in the tall tower there, but it's also online. But at the same time, the presenters, with a few exceptions, are all going to be in person at the session. But you will have that opportunity to connect with people who have obviously a more in-depth understanding of the topics and develop those relationships. There's also the ability, once you start to meet people and have those conversations in the hallways and over coffee, and you start to realize the connections and the opportunities, I think it is, over those 5 days, a good opportunity to meet those people who are going to be part of your career for the next 20, 30 years in the gaming world in Canada.
Hey, Harley, is this something that do you and Don see, now that you're bringing it back for this year, is this something that you'd like to do on an annual basis moving forward?
It's a function of demand, the marketplace, where Osgoode's at. I mean, definitely be interesting to go back to Osgoode and teach gambling law to the students again. I mean, the popularity, like we said, in the last few years has exploded. My guess is every guy that would sign up for our course would be showing us their same game parlays on FanDuel and sweating those while we're teaching the classes. So definitely from that perspective, it'd be interesting. I don't know about every year, but every couple of years for sure.
Yeah, I think as well, there's also the opportunity for other day courses. And so it's not a certificate course itself, but we did offer a one-day course as a compliance, focused solely on compliance. One of the nice things about this is there is a formal certificate that you get. There is an exam at the end of it. I don't want to spoil the secret about this, but this is an academically valid program. And there is a certificate that you get from Osgoode Law School as a result of this, which I think is an important part of development of anybody's career, whether a lawyer or somebody else in the industry. So I think we would be interested in also these sort of day-long courses and some of the other aspects.
Yeah, I think what we see is we had Amanda Brewer on the show a couple of weeks ago, and we had Jesse Learmont and Travis Geiger from WagerWire talking about this new awards program they're starting with startup companies around the next IO Summit in New York City next month. Even though there are a lot of gambling conferences around the world, there's really only the Canadian Gaming Summit that has a focus in Canada. And I think what we have seen, Harley, is that there have been a lot of people who are newcomers to this industry who, with 50 operators in Ontario, that they've come to work in this marketplace. And whether they come from fintech or the AML side or engineers or whatever, that a lot of these people have come in not having worked in the gambling industry. No different than when I started this newsletter 4 years ago. I knew nothing. I don't even think I knew what a same game parlay was, Harley.
Right.
So I think there is a demand for a program like this that is very Canadian focused. And almost like, to me, it's almost like an initiation program. If you work for an operator and you were someone who came from the banking industry and got hired by PointsBet, for example, this program would be right in your wheelhouse to come in and cut your teeth.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Well said.
I think, Steve,
go ahead, Don.
one of the other things that you twigged on as well as Canadian. I mean, right now we're going through different issues with the United States, etc. We'll work those out, I'm sure, as time goes on. But this is a Canadian focus. And it is important, I think, to recognize that Canada is one of the largest gaming marketplaces in the world. And it's done in a responsible fashion. There's integrity throughout the system, etc. But it is a very large entertainment product in Canada. And in the world, it is one of the largest markets. And with the advent of iGaming in particular, the number of Canadian companies that have started to grow and to get established, and the investment that Canadians are doing in the industry, I think is phenomenal. And things like this course hopefully just feed into that. The economic development opportunities for Canadians are phenomenal in the gaming world. And we hope that we contribute a little bit to providing some of the legal foundation and understanding of some of the business principles, etc., through this program.
Hey, I'd love to get, because I have both you, and again, I think you probably come at this a little bit differently. But Harley, sort of as someone who's a frequent bettor, and Don, with your background with regulators and on the legal side, just your thoughts on the Ontario market, because I think what we have seen is a lot of the coverage from mainstream media, and this is something that Dave Briggs wrote about again in the newsletter a couple of weeks ago. It's been a frequent issue on this show with our guests, is that this is an industry that's come under an awful lot of criticism. Don, to your point earlier, a lot of discussion around responsible gambling. We know the angst around advertising and marketing in the early days in the Ontario market. But Don, I'll maybe start with you. Just, as we sit here, April will be the third anniversary of Ontario's regulated market. Just your overall thoughts on the market here, maybe expanding on the fact that, as you point out, that I think globally this industry has a very good reputation in Ontario.
Everything can be improved. I mean, we start from that premise, and the regulatory structure was deliberately designed to allow for and encourage ongoing evolution that is sensitive to the market conditions and business dynamics. Having said that, when I read some of the criticism of the industry that exists, for example, the recent headlines dealing with AML, well, the study that was done by FinTrack was primarily related to activities that were occurring prior to iGaming Ontario. So the headline to me was misleading because they were talking about stuff that the iGaming Ontario model was intended to address, making sure that the betting that is occurring falls into an AML compliant process, which it was not beforehand. The same thing with RG. The RG aspects of this are very, very strong. Both iGaming Ontario and AGCO, just in the Ontario market, and you have comparable things in the others where it's Crown Corporations, BCLC, and others. They have very strong RG and AML aspects of it. you have to know your client, you know your customer, and intervene in the iGaming market. That's a requirement of the AGCO. It's a requirement of iGaming Ontario, that if you think there is statistics that indicate that this person A, is of some risk, you have a positive obligation to intervene with that individual. That didn't exist before, when it was a gray market operator. And one of the driving forces of the government of Ontario and others was obviously to get some of the money that was going on. But for my read of the political arm of government, was we want to get this captured in order to offer the security, the technology, the cybersecurity that is there, so you have a higher standard of assurance that your data is going to be going to be protected, but also the AML and the responsible gambling aspect of it. So if you looked at the announcements, yeah, money was part of it, but the government actually didn't think it would be this successful. The political arm of government did not think the iGaming Ontario would be as successful as it is. And I think that's kudos to people in the industry, to iGaming Ontario, to the AGCO and the people there, but also the government of Ontario, more broadly speaking, including OLG. OLG came to the table to work on some of these things as well, even though at times it was counterintuitive towards some of this. So it is, to me, one of the great success stories of political arm of government, public service arm of government, agencies, regulatory agencies, operating agencies, the private sector, and support groups achieving 95% of the objectives. And that remaining 5%, well, there's always opportunity to improve. I think it's been a great, great success story, and a success story for Canada and Canadians. It is providing jobs to Canadians. It is providing wealth creation to Canadians, and is providing employment opportunities in the longer run to Canadians.
Harley?
Yeah, I think Don summed it up. It's a growing market. It was an interesting market. I mean, was it done perfectly? No. As a professional sports bettor, do I think they got a lot of things wrong? They pick a little too much on the pros and let casual guys lose too much. And I definitely think they dropped the ball allowing Connor McDavid to advertise to children, but still not allow sports books to advertise bonuses that like price conscious adults would pay attention to. So they made some mistakes that I'm sure the other jurisdictions will learn from. I'm surprised they haven't adjusted. It's been 2-3 years, but for the most part, we got a pretty good marketplace.
Hey, Harley, I'll start with you, but I want Don's thoughts on this too. I mean, Alberta, of course, if you talk to anybody in the industry right now, inside Ontario and outside, almost the first question is, when is Alberta going to open? And I guess the question for me, Harley, is what can Alberta do differently, or what are your thoughts in terms of Alberta supporting an open marketplace?
I mean, I'm shocked that Alberta hasn't gone. They seem like such a free market society in general, and they've seen the success from Ontario's perspective. So I'm surprised this has taken 2 years longer than everybody said it's happening for sure. So, I mean, like sports betting, when everybody says something's a lock, it doesn't tend to happen. What I would do if I was Alberta learning from Ontario, I mean, I touched upon some of the stuff. I wouldn't have athletes, and I definitely wouldn't have athletes under the age of 30 being allowed to advertise. That's just targeting children. Coupons, ads, bonuses definitely would encourage advertising that. I mean, the kids I talk to don't care at all about bonuses or value. That's 30 and 40 and 50-year-old types, which are presumably who you want betting. I mean, this is an Alberta thing. Alberta, Ontario, TSN, Sportsnet. These guys should have specialty betting channels with really good content, and you should be able to block it so the kids aren't watching it. I mean, this half-pregnant thing where it's superficial coverage on all of it, I don't like. I hope Alberta hires more knowledgeable people than I go or AGCO did in terms of sports betting. It requires deep, intimate knowledge. And when players are getting into fights with sports books about terms and conditions, IGO and AGCO have no clue. I mean, they're Googling terms, hoping the operators aren't fleecing the bettors. But at the end of the day, you really need knowledgeable people. And unfortunately, they just didn't hire them. And I mean, it's tough. I was reading something that has nothing to do with sports betting. They were talking about a judge who's 65 years old trying to adjudicate a cryptocurrency case. Like, that judge has no clue how crypto works. So, unfortunately, IGO and AGCO could have hired specialists. They didn't. And, I mean, we know that the judges there should probably be some smart 16-year-old kid that's advising the judges on how crypto works, because how else do you expect them to adjudicate matters? And IGO and AGCO should relook at that and at least have a couple knowledgeable people on staff.
Yeah, I've heard the same complaints about some of the gaming commissions in the U.S., where you have people sitting in those commissions that have no experience in the gambling industry, right?
100%. So Michael Roxborough, who set the lines in the 80s, the Roxy lines, used to say that the smartest bettor is smarter than even the smartest operator, but even the stupidest operator is smarter than every regulator. And I mean, it just seems logical that you would find a couple people with knowledge about a specific area to help you run it. But no, that's kind of the way of the regulators apparently in almost all the world. I was reading, I don't remember which one now. There's a couple of states that kind of have it better, but for the most part, it's a complaint across the industry.
Hey, Don, your thoughts on Alberta?
That's why Harley and I make a good team. It's sort of the yin and the yang, the black and the white around this. I can see where they're coming from. We look at Ontario and we're looking back at this and saying, okay, April 2022 and what the success has been, given Harley's legitimate comments and concerns around sports wagering, etc. But 2022 started at ICE in 2019. Right? And that's when those initial discussions started to occur with the iGaming industry around a competitive regulated market in Ontario. That was a 3-year program, right? And no matter how many examples you can do and look at with respect to a regulated marketplace, there were always political dynamics. There were political dynamics in Ontario that caused certain changes and delays, etc. There are political dynamics within Alberta. There will be, hopefully, in British Columbia and various other jurisdictions across Canada that you can't account for. And those things are part of the discussion. And so one of the frustrations of being in government for the number of years I was the pace of decision making. But that pace of decision making is part of the reality. And the decision making within Alberta, when you look at it, it's been a year plus a few months. Okay. Is that where we want things to be from an industry point of view? No. Am I personally surprised by this? No. I wouldn't be surprised if we go into 2026. That's not a prediction by any means. I'm not suggesting that it will do that. But if you look at the pace of government decision making, it's a very slow process, even when you're drawing on successes in other jurisdictions, because every province is different social context, different political context, different economic context. So hopefully the next iteration, G2E, the minister will be announcing the regulatory structure and all these other things that we hoped he was going to announce at the last G2E, but it will come. It will be there.
Yeah, I think, Don, that's even a bigger challenge right now, given what's going on in the relationship between Canada and the U.S. and obviously even here in Ontario with an election and provincial governments across the country facing serious challenges, whether it's healthcare, education, housing. I mean, there's as the old saying goes, that there appear to be bigger fish to fry right now.
I think that's true. And, as Canadians, we want Canada to be successful as an independent country in the international world. And iGaming and land-based gaming, when you compare those issues, these are opportunities and important opportunities, but it is a much broader political context that we're working in.
Hey guys, last question. Like Harley, when you talk when I mentioned the subject matter earlier, Don mentions there's an exam. There might be people who are a little bit intimidated about participating in this program. What advice would you give to them?
It's designed like it's 90 plus, 95, 99% pass. It's designed just to have an exam so you review the materials and you study the materials. If you pay attention at all or you show even the remotest effort or interest, that's not the issue. You comply, you get your certificates.
Don, last word for you.
It's at a low price of $3,395. You can do it online, in person, or a combination, and you have about a year afterwards of access to the materials. And so thank you, Steve, for providing this opportunity to talk about it. And we do hope that a number of people join, not only for the success of the certificate program itself, but as an entree, or to reinforce your understanding of the issues that the gaming entertainment provides.
Yeah, I'll take the last word. I would encourage if someone who works for a current operator works in the industry, that this would be a great education or an investment by the company and their employees. And companies always say they're looking for those opportunities today. So I would that's my 2 cents worth. Don Bourgeois is the counsel to the Gambling Law Practice Group at Fogler Rubinoff LLP, also the principal of Gaming and Regulation Group, Inc. Harley Redlick is the principal of H. Redlick Consulting, and you can follow Harley. You always see him on X at Sharp Edge Picks. Guys, really appreciate you doing this. I think this is such a terrific program. I believe I'm participating in the first session on April 3rd. It runs through May 8th, but I'm looking forward to being at Osgoode Hall in early April and to seeing both of you there.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. Thanks,
Awesome.
Steve.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Steve.
That's it for this episode of the Gaming News Canada Show presented by GBG Plc. You can find this and all of our podcasts at gamingnewscanada.ca and on the various podcast platforms. Again, just so grateful to Harley Redlick and Don Bourgeois for joining us today, and we will see everybody again very soon.